Kia ora mai anō. Crime and punishment were two big themes during the election campaign. So I spoke to the man who was in charge of both of those portfolios for the coalition government, the Minister of Corrections and Police, the Honourable Mark Mitchell. Minister, tēnā koe. Welcome to the program. Thank you very much for your time. I just wanted to start, if I could, by following on from the story that we've just played, and in particular the Steps to Freedom grant. Now, I know it's not your ministerial portfolio responsibility, but do you agree with the idea of raising that grant to $1,000, particularly in helping the transition for those in corrections out into the public?
Look, I think that, like you've just raised, that is an MSD decision. I'm pretty sure that the Minister, Louise Upson, has indicated that she is seeking advice on that from officials and that she recognises what the issue is there. She also highlighted the fact that it's important that there is other support that's available to our prisoners when they are actually making their exit from the correction system and reintegrating back into our communities again.
Why are Māori prison rates so high, do you think?
So what I feel about this is that we are now 2, 3, 4 generations into social dysfunction, whether it be gangs, whether it be a criminal lifestyle, whether it's feeling like you are marginalised or on the outside of communities. That's where a lot of this family harm sits, a lot of the overrepresentation in terms of victimisations, and of course the overrepresentation of Māori in our criminal justice system and corrections. And so for us to be serious about, as a country, to be able to fix that, and I think some of the people that you interviewed that are heavily involved in this area, who I've got enormous admiration for the work that they're doing, they have highlighted that. And I agree with them, is that they've recognised that there's a lot of social harm. To deal with that, we have to go right back into people's lives. We have to be able to use the social investment model, which is us as a country deciding where we invest in people's lives. Do we invest much earlier? Do we stay with them much longer to try and break that intergenerational harm and get them on a track where they can realise the great opportunities that our country has to offer? What
will your specific strategy be? There is a Māori strategy, as you know, Hōkairangi, that is in place at the moment. What will your strategy be to address the high rates of Māori?
So as the incoming minister, to reinforce and continue to develop my own personal relationships with iwi and iwi leadership and hapu leadership in terms of the engagement that they want to have in our correction system to help rehabilitate and reintegrate prisoners, Māori prisoners, as they come out of the correction system. I've got a very big focus on trades training and giving them real life skills so that when they leave prison, they've got a much better chance of going into some meaningful employment where they're getting paid well. We heard him saying that he's got some self-esteem, he feels valued, and that's exactly the pathway that I'm going down in terms of what we're delivering in corrections.
Can you, I mean, the Hōkairangi strategy talks about trying to reduce the rate of Māori in prison, recidivism rates and the like, to be of a similar rate to that of non-Māori in the non-Māori population. So 37% of people proceeded against by police, 45% of people convicted and 52% of people in prison are Māori. Can you commit to decreasing those rates by the end of this political term, and if so, what will that number be?
Well, we want to decrease all rates. We want to decrease the social harm, the victimisations. We want to reduce the serious violent retail crime that we see. We want to start to dismantle the gangs and suppress the gangs, especially those gang members with families, try and get them out of the gangs, rehabilitated and back into joining society. But the fact is this, the police and the corrections do not get to choose who is out there offending and causing the harm. They've got no control over that. They have to respond and they have to deal with it. And so we go right back to what I was saying originally. We need to use that social investment model. We need to go right back into people's lives.
I understand.
We have to keep them on a positive pathway instead of coming into our criminal justice system.
I understand that, but this government is a government looking for outcomes, right? And a clear outcome would be a number by which it will commit to decrease the rates of Māori in prison, and in particular that high rate of 52% of Māori who are in prison. So what will you commit to? What's a target? What will the figure be by the end of this political term?
We are developing targets, and at the moment we're going through work in the justice system to develop some targets that we want to set, because we do feel that actually the public service needs to have targets. We need to set targets as a government so that we can actually measure our success and what we're actually achieving. The best way to stop that pipeline of people coming into our criminal justice system is that social investment model. It's going right back in their lives and seeing where we make an intervention, where we make the investment as a country to actually stop them coming into the criminal justice system in the beginning.
The Hāpaitia Te Oranga Tangata Safe and Effective Justice Program noted, quote, a common purpose, public confidence and strong treaty-based partnerships with Māori were identified as necessary for a foundation to sustain an effort that would be required over successive terms of government to have an effective justice program and system. Do you support that?
I agree entirely.
Okay, so what does that treaty-based partnership look like then if we have a government that seems to be questioning the place?
Well, it's got to be highly flexible, and it's got to be a genuine partnership between, for example, corrections and police, iwi leadership, hapu leadership, and I think that is happening. The talks that I'm having with iwi leaders that I meet with is quite simply, we cannot do this without your leadership. We cannot do this without you putting a line in the sand also, and saying that there's been too much intergenerational harm. We don't want our people in the gangs, we want them out of the gangs. We don't want the next generation coming through. And that's a partnership with central government, with iwi, with local government, with community groups. That's a whole of community response in terms of making sure we all have a moral obligation to do the best that we can to try and break that intergenerational sort of dysfunction and social isolation that creates a lot of this offending.
Okay, do you, just so I'm clear, you do support Hokairangi in its current form and structure?
Well, I think that any program you have to continually review and improve.
What does that look like to you?
But I definitely support with that. Well, for me, let me give you an example, is that, and this is a very practical example. One of the ladies on the program, sorry,
Tui.
So Tui, sorry, I just watched it, so excuse me for that. But she raised a simple issue around a driver's licence. So we've actually got programs running at the moment in corrections to give prisoners, as they exit, a learner licence, which gives them at least a fighting chance when they come out. Now, as the incoming minister, I've said, can we go away and do some work and find out whether or not we can deliver a program, which is very difficult, logistically it's very hard, but can we look at a program where when they exit corrections, they've got something like a heavy vehicles licence, so they can go straight into a job where they're actually driving a truck or they're operating heavy machinery. That to me is a huge enabler.
Do we have a staffing crisis in our prisons today?
So we have had a lot of pressure on our frontline corrections officers, and we have recently changed the recruiting campaign that's been out there on the TV.
But that doesn't assure that you get the increase in numbers you need today.
We are getting the increase in numbers. So we've had.
So why in some instances, the Minister, do we have, in some examples, where we should have 5 duty corrections staff, we only have 1 or 2? Why is that?
Because we have been behind in the numbers, right? But that is changing. We've got the most corrections officers going through training that we've had for a long time. It's 153. The latest marketing campaign or recruiting campaign that went out there has been very effective. We've had over 2,500 applications, the most that we've ever had. I visited Auckland Prison last week. They've got a pipeline of people that are wanting to come in and be recruited to go into there. So there's some very good work being done around recruitment, but I recognise that the system is under enormous pressure because they have been down on numbers.
In 2020, you said in response, I think, to the Electoral Registration of Sentenced Prisoners Amendment Bill, the following quote, the best thing, Kelvin, that you can do, or that Māoridom can do, is look at ways that you can get into a young guy's life, the young guy back in Gisborne on the East Coast, how to get into his life with social investment, invest early to get him off track. Now, you've talked about that earlier. The issue, though, is that frames the conversation and the causes and consequences of offending to an individual concern rather than a much wider one, which is the importance of whānau, of Māori, of hapu in the process.
But we have to take an individual approach to this.
Yeah, but see, the research suggests that's not the right way to do it. In fact, in the US, it's been shown that it demonstrates prisoner disenfranchisement has ripple effects, particularly when you focus on the individual.
Well, but I was talking about social investment there. I mean, I just want to share with you a personal example of when, as a young police officer working on the East Coast in Gisborne, I was called out one night. There was a young guy, he was 17 years old. He had broken into a vehicle and stolen some of the contents. He was a young guy that had dropped out of school. His dad was a member of the Gisborne branch of the mongrel mob, and his uncles and everyone else was sort of involved in the mob in Gisborne. And I said, well, you know, what job are you doing? And he said, I'm unemployed. And I said, but that's not a job. I said, what training? What job are you doing? He goes, that's what my dad does. And the light bulb came on in my head at that moment, and I realised that he had been born into a family where it was a gang family, where if we'd made an investment maybe in his mum, with giving her some additional training, giving her some budgeting skills and things like that, if we manage to prise the dad out of the gang, get him in some meaningful employment, all of a sudden his outlook looks very different. Government cannot do that by itself.
No, I understand that.
Where is iwi in that conversation? Where's the leadership?
And we'll come back to a bit more of that. You've raised gangs a couple of times. We'll talk about gangs. We'll talk about that.
Well, they're a big driver.
Throwing to break, Minister.
Sorry, mate.
Throwing to Ed.
Sorry, mate.
We've got more with the Minister, Mark Mitchell, after this.